In the heart of Mexico, the Sierra Madre Occidental Mountains carve a fortress of stone and shadow across the landscape. This is Jalisco, a state of breathtaking beauty and brutal realities. For decades, these remote highlands have served as a sanctuary, a stronghold for those who operate beyond the reach of the law. It's a kingdom built on fear, financed by a global empire of narcotics, and ruled by a ghost. A man few had ever seen, but whose name was whispered with a mixture of reverence and terror across 2 continents. Deep within this territory lies Tapalpa, a designated Pueblo Mágico, or magical town. Its cobblestone streets and red-roofed colonial buildings are a postcard of tranquility, a weekend escape for city dwellers from Guadalajara. But on this night, the world's most wanted man was sleeping. Sunday, February 22, 2026, a date that will be etched into the bloody history of the drug wars. Before the first light of dawn, elite units of the Mexican Special Forces descended on the town of Tapalpa. This wasn't a routine police action. It was a decapitation strike, the culmination of years of intelligence, frustration, and failed attempts. Their target? Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, better known as El Mencho, the enigmatic and ruthlessly violent leader of the Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, or CJNG. A former avocado farmer and local police officer who transformed a splinter group of assassins into one of the most powerful and feared transnational criminal organizations on the planet. A man so elusive, so protected, that the United States government had placed a $15 million bounty on his head, one of the largest in history, rivaling those for figures like Osama bin Laden. For years, El Mencho had outmaneuvered and outfought the authorities, melting back into the mountains and cities of his home turf, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. But his luck was about to run out. The raid was short, violent, and absolute. Reports from the ground describe a meticulously planned operation. Special Forces helicopters, flying low to avoid radar, inserted teams at the town's perimeter, cutting off all escape routes. Simultaneously, assault teams stormed the specific compound where El Mencho was located. The cartel's outer security was caught completely by surprise. The ensuing gun battle was fierce, but brief. El Mencho, cornered and with no way out, was reportedly wounded during the initial exchange of fire. He was captured alive, but his reign was over. He died from his injuries while being airlifted to a maximum security facility in Mexico City. The ghost had been caught. But this wasn't just a Mexican victory. The speed and precision of the raid pointed to something more. Within hours, the confirmation came. In a terse press briefing from Washington, D.C., the White House confirmed that U.S. intelligence had provided the critical blueprint that pinpointed the cartel leader's location. Years of electronic surveillance, informant networks, and satellite tracking, managed by agencies like the DEA and CIA, had finally paid off. It was a landmark moment of cross-border cooperation in the fight against organized crime. A success story that both governments were eager to celebrate. The news flashed across the globe. El Mencho is dead. The architect of the fentanyl epidemic that has poisoned North America, the man responsible for tens of thousands of deaths, was gone. For a moment, it seemed like a turning point, a decisive blow that could finally cripple the CJNG and stem the tide of deadly narcotics. But in the complex and brutal ecosystem of the drug trade, the death of a king doesn't always mean the end of the kingdom. Often, it's just the opposite. It creates a power vacuum, a chaotic and bloody scramble for the throne. The king of fentanyl is dead, but the war has only just begun. The death of a king doesn't end the kingdom, it unleashes a storm. For the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, mourning was not an option. Retaliation was the only language they intended to speak. This wasn't just revenge, it was a declaration of war on the state itself, a strategy known by a chilling name, narco-terror. As the news of El Mencho's demise rippled through the underworld and into the halls of government, Jalisco Governor Pablo Lemus, understanding the imminent threat, made a critical decision. He activated Code Red, a state-level emergency protocol designed for catastrophic security breakdowns. It was a signal to every police officer, soldier, and first responder. The worst was coming. But the CJNG's response was faster and more widespread than anyone anticipated. It was a coordinated, multi-state siege. Across nearly a dozen states, from the cartel's heartland in Michoacán and Jalisco, stretching to the vital port of Colima, and all the way to the U.S. border in Tamaulipas, the CJNG paralyzed the nation. This wasn't random violence. It was a meticulously planned operation. Over 250 roadblocks, known as narco-bloqueos, were erected with terrifying efficiency. Buses, cargo trucks, and private vehicles were hijacked and set ablaze, creating impassable walls of fire. The strategy was twofold: trap military and police convoys in fiery choke points and simultaneously terrorize the public into a state of submission. The message was brutally simple: the government cannot protect you. We are in control. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Cities like Guadalajara, Mexico's second-largest metropolis and a hub of culture and commerce, transformed into ghost towns overnight. The bustling streets fell silent, replaced by an unnerving quiet broken only by distant sirens and the crackle of news reports. Residents, gripped by fear, hunkered down in their homes, doors locked, watching the chaos unfold on their screens. Social media became a torrent of panicked warnings, unverified rumors, and terrifying first-hand videos, amplifying the sense of helplessness. The digital fear was just as paralyzing as the physical roadblocks. For millions, the state had ceased to exist, replaced by the omnipresent threat of the cartel. The chaos wasn't confined to the highways. The cartel escalated its assault by targeting the nation's economic lifelines, its airports. In the major tourist destination of Puerto Vallarta and the critical border city of Reynosa, terminals descended into pure chaos. Armed sicarios initiated attacks near airport perimeters, their gunfire echoing through the terminals. Panic erupted. Travelers, who moments before were waiting for their flights, were now scrambling for their lives, ducking behind check-in counters and luggage carousels. These weren't just stray bullets. They were targeted attacks designed to sever Mexico's connection to the outside world and maximize international attention. In 30 seconds, we'll reveal how this single night of terror sent shockwaves through global markets and forced an unprecedented response from international airlines. The attacks worked. The response from the global community was swift and decisive. Fearing for the safety of their crews and passengers, international airlines began grounding all flights. Carriers like Air Canada, Delta, and United Airlines, which operate hundreds of flights to Mexico daily, issued immediate cancellations and travel advisories. The economic fallout was instantaneous. The tourism industry, a pillar of the Mexican economy, was brought to its knees in a matter of hours. Stock futures for travel and logistics companies with exposure to the region trembled. The cartel had successfully internationalized the crisis, forcing the world to watch. The message, written in fire and fear across the face of the country, was now undeniably clear. If our leader falls, the country burns with him. The night of narco-terror was a demonstration of power so profound, it would redefine the fight against organized crime in Mexico for years to come. With the head of the snake removed, a terrifying power vacuum has opened. The fall of a king doesn't always bring peace. More often, it unleashes the princes. For years, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, was the undisputed center of gravity for the Cartel de Jalisco New Generation. His authority was absolute, his vision singular. Now, that center is gone. Security experts aren't just predicting instability, they are forecasting an imminent and brutal internal civil war. The organization El Mencho, built with military precision, is now a fractured kingdom of ambitious lieutenants, each with their own loyal soldiers, their own supply lines, and their own claim to the throne. We're talking about figures like Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, known as L03, El Mencho's own stepson, long rumored to be the heir apparent. but also regional commanders, men who control key trafficking plazas from Tijuana to the Yucatan, who may now see their chance to break away or seize total control. The prize they're fighting for is the multi-billion-dollar fentanyl trade, a river of poison that flows north and a river of cash that flows south. The violence will not be contained to the underworld. It will spill onto the streets, as it always does. But the stakes are even higher, extending far beyond Mexico's borders. The CJNG's operational network is a global enterprise. The fentanyl that originates in their super labs doesn't just impact American cities. It reaches Canada, Europe, and even Australia. The chaos in Jalisco will create shockwaves in global narcotics markets. A fractured CJNG could mean more unpredictable, more violent, and more desperate factions competing for international partners. In Washington and Ottawa, the conversation is shifting dramatically. For years, the strategy was focused on a single high-value target. Now, policymakers face a multi-headed hydra. We can expect to see urgent policy shifts, increased pressure for cross-border operations, and a fortification of the US-Mexico border that could have profound economic consequences for both nations. The symbiotic trade relationship, worth over $600 billion annually, now hangs in the balance, threatened by the very real possibility of widespread instability and border closures. The fallout from this one night will reshape North American security and economic policy for the next decade. And then there is the World Cup. In just a few months, Mexico is scheduled to co-host the world's biggest sporting event. The 2026 FIFA World Cup is meant to be a celebration, a moment of national pride, and a massive economic boon. Cities like Guadalajara, Monterrey, and Mexico City have spent years and billions of dollars preparing to welcome the world. But as of tonight, February 22nd, that dream is turning into a global nightmare. Viral reports, which are now being picked up by major international news outlets, are circulating that FIFA is holding emergency meetings in Zurich. The single item on the agenda: the catastrophic security collapse in Mexico. Sources inside the organization suggest that contingency plans, once considered a distant formality, are now being actively discussed. The most drastic option on the table is moving all of Mexico's scheduled games to its co-hosts, the United States and Canada. While Mexican authorities and local organizing committees publicly claim the tournament will proceed as planned, their reassurances ring hollow. The images of burning stadiums, of shelter-in-place orders being issued for American citizens, and of airports in lockdown tell a different, more terrifying story. The world is watching, and the clock is ticking. We have entered a new, terrifying era of narco-terrorism. The capture of one man was meant to be an ending, a victory. Instead, it has become a terrifying beginning. The files on El Mencho are now closed, a chapter of criminal history written and sealed. But the files on the future of Mexico and indeed the future of the global war on drugs have just been blown wide open. What happens next? 3 potential scenarios loom. First, fragmentation. The CJNG shatters into a dozen smaller, warring factions, leading to a prolonged period of nationwide violence as they fight for territory, a scenario that would turn vast swathes of the country into ungovernable spaces. Second, consolidation. A new leader, perhaps more ruthless and sophisticated than El Mencho, emerges from the chaos, uniting the cartel and launching a campaign of revenge against the state, escalating the conflict to unprecedented levels. Or third, state failure. The government, overwhelmed by the scale of the violence and political pressure, loses control of key regions, forcing international intervention and raising questions about national sovereignty. The events of the coming weeks will be critical. The world will be watching key metrics: the body count, the stability of the peso, and the final decision from FIFA. This is more than just another crime story. This is the story of a nation at a crossroads, a story that will define a generation. This is the True Crime docuseries. The fallout from the most consequential night in modern criminal history is just beginning. Subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and join us as we follow every development, every lead, and every consequence. The story is far from over.